You sit at a table, facing off against a man with crazy swirling eyes. He seems deranged, and he teaches you how to play a card game. The rules are simple. Draw from either one of two decks. One deck contains only squirrels. The other contains various creatures. In order to play most creatures, you will need at least one squirrel on the board to sacrifice them. One squirrel equals one currency of blood. Higher level creatures require more blood, and you can also sacrifice creatures already on the board. This sacrificing mechanic is the foundation of Inscryption. It's well designed and very simple to learn. Slowly, new elements are added which make it more complex, but it never feels overwhelming. You also get the opportunity to strengthen your cards and sacrifice them to transfer special abilities to other cards. The game is set up like a roguelike. You navigate the map using a little figurine meant to represent you. You often have choices about where to go, and one thing I wish the game told you was what the icons meant on the map, because often I'd get confused as to what they meant. The end goal for each of the maps is to defeat the boss. These are larger scale fights that involve two phases, and they can be tricky, but once you learn their attacks, you should be okay. I like how these fights reward you if you go in with full health, and I also like that they replenish your health if you defeat them. The game expects you to die, and there's some cool meta narrative involving that. Some of your cards will talk to you and encourage you to search the room you're in to find other cards that can help you. So when you're not in combat, you can actually get up off of the table and look around the cabin you're in with this old man. There are a few little puzzles here that you sort of need to do to unlock these cards that will help you on your journey to defeat all the bosses. Towards the end of this section of the game, I did feel a bit frustrated, as on the fourth and final boss, I kept dying, and when you die in this game, you have to do everything again. So you have to verse all three bosses again, go through all three areas again, and then work your way up to that final boss. The way I ended up getting through this was a cheeky little strat I'll share with you. One of the encounters on the map is someone called the Woodworker. She lets you pick different types of creature heads and match them with certain abilities. When you match the two together, this ability, which applies to this certain type of creature, lasts the entire game unless you go to a different woodworker and change it. What I ended up doing was matching a rodent head to an ability which gives me a duplicate of that card when I play it. Now, a squirrel is a type of rodent, so this meant that whenever I played a squirrel, I would get another one in my hand. Essentially infinite squirrels. This eliminated the need for me to draw squirrels, which meant I could just draw from the creature cards and summon very powerful creatures. This enabled me to get through that final boss very easily. Once you defeat this final boss, you go into the second half of the game. Now, there will be some spoilers here as I describe the second half and what is different about it. The game's visuals change dramatically, but the card mechanics stay relatively the same, with the exception that you no longer draw squirrels, which to me was a big fundamental of the game, and to totally remove that felt very jarring. You're asked to choose between 4 different decks, which represent the 4 different bosses. Some of these decks have completely new mechanics which are not really taught to you, and I was very confused that even though I chose one specific type of deck, I was able to access all the other types of cards, which made me question why I had to choose a deck in the first place when I have access to everything. The gameplay here definitely feels not as polished. There are certain times in matches where I would have to restart the match because I couldn't play anything. I didn't have the resources to play anything. I really wish the squirrel mechanic was kept in here, as that was so fundamental to the rest of the game. The final third of the game changes styles again, and this time it's a very retro, futuristic looking tone, which is really cool, and the gameplay is much more like it is at the beginning. The story is framed using a found footage narrative. You'll see many FMV VHS recordings of a fictional man called Luke Carter, who is an online card gaming enthusiast. He stumbles upon the Inscryption game and gets embroiled in a conspiracy theory which is very meta and very appropriate for the creator of Pony Island. The acting in these clips is extremely cheesy and hard to take seriously. At first I found them pretty funny, but As the game went on, I felt there was probably too many of these, but you don't have to watch these clips. They can be totally skipped if you don't want to view them. A few little extra comments I have. There are some cards with unexplained symbols, and when you go in the index to see what they mean, the page is smeared with a black ink. I'm not sure why this is and how you're able to find out what these cards mean, but I was never able to. Sound design is extremely minimal to the point of almost being non-existent. I feel like a lot of this game could use with more of a soundtrack, especially when you're repeating runs and having to do the same thing over and over again. I also find it strange how I was never able to view my deck. I was never taught how to do that. You are able to see your deck when you go to sacrifice a card and in some certain situations, but as far as I can tell, you couldn't do it whenever you wanted. There is some great little details in this game as well. I love when you defeat the Trapper boss. In subsequent runs, the Trapper's prices are cheaper. I also love how this game incentivizes doing as much damage as possible. I feel like in a lot of games like this, you try and just get through with the bare minimum because there's no real point in going overkill, whereas here, if you do more damage than your opponent has health, that damage is translated into currency, which you can use to buy things. Overall, I can see why people love this game, and I would definitely recommend it if you're into weird games, meta games, or just card games. Thanks for listening.